Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you and welcome to the last in our current series of Doha debates, coming to you from the Gulf state of Qatar and sponsored by the Qatar Foundation. The old regimes in Egypt and Tunisia may have been swept away, but elsewhere in the Arab world, a number of governments are fighting for their survival. Repression, violence and intimidation have been their weapons of choice, but with varying results. Tonight we look at their chances of survival. How effective has brutality been in Yemen, in Syria or in Bahrain? Have those and other governments fought off the challenge to their leadership, or are they fatally wounded from within? Has their reputation been badly damaged? And will the international community ever accept them back into the fold? All questions that lie at the heart of our motion. This House believes that resistance to the Arab Spring is futile. Our panellists are, as usual, deeply divided. Speaking for the motion, Anwar Bukhast, Professor of International Relations at McDaniel College in the US and a consultant for Jane's Intelligence Review. And with him, Nadim Khouri. He's the Human Rights Watch researcher for Syria and Lebanon, a lawyer by training. He's also worked as an investigator for the UN. Speaking against the motion, Jane Kininmon, Senior Research Fellow at the Royal Institute for International Affairs in London. She has reported widely on the Middle East and North Africa for The Economist magazine. And with her, Ahmed Ali Al-Muhaini. He's Vice Principal of the Saeed Al-Shakri Legal Training Center in Oman and Strategic Consultant for the country's first political think tank. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. So now let me first of all ask Anwar Bukhast to speak for the motion.
Thanks, Tim. Pleasure to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, the Arab street has finally risen from its anguish. This extraordinary Arab awakening has demolished the myth that Arabs are doomed to be fatalistic losers, that their cultural mindset and political traditions are unsuited to democracy. The sight of millions of pro-democracy protesters from Libya to Yemen to Syria braving tanks and riot squads and regime thugs and expressing the determination to replicate the historic feats of their counterparts in Tunisia and Egypt has set these preconceptions in fire. Skeptics of Arab democracy see the triumph of pro-democracy forces as unlikely, insecure, as transient. The moment that normalcy returns to the streets of Cairo and other major metropolitan areas in the Arab world, we are told freedom fever will lose its steam. The battle lines of the future will look eerily or will resemble eerily those of the past. But the reality we are witnessing today in the Arab world is that the orthodoxies of the past do not hold much appeal in a region where youth aspire for a better life, for a life of dignity, development, and freedom. Make no mistake about it, this period of historic change in the Arab world will not be short, nor will it be easy, nor will it be without setbacks. There will be ups and downs in the years and in the months and years ahead. But the forces of change, driven by technology, demographics, and youths, have been unleashed, and there is no going back. With very few exceptions, every society in the Arab world today is feeling the pressure for political change. Whatever the outcome in the protracted conflicts in Libya, Syria, and Yemen, it's almost certain that these countries will look different in the years to come. Those regimes that have chosen to dig in or try to reassert their authoritarian controls will find only temporary reprieve. Experience, theory, and history tells us that regimes who have lost their legitimacy cannot survive.
Could you come to a close, please?
Sure, and the legitimacy of the Syrian, Libyan, and Yemeni dictators is totally spent. So they will be overthrown, if not now, then in the coming years. Thank you.
Anwar Bukhast, thank you very much indeed. You say these countries aren't going to look the same, they could look worse, aren't they? As you speak, I mean, Arabs may not be doomed to repeat what they've had in the past, they're doomed to die. They're dying in very large numbers, as you know, around the region. That's not a good sign, is it?
I mean, sure, that's fair. I mean, again,
it's fair. Well, how do you mean it's fair?
Well, the expectation is that with the Syrian regime, its reaction, and the Libyan regime is no different from other reactions in. But
there's no sign that the Libyan or Syrian regime at least, is cracking. I mean, where are the massive defections from the government? Where are the massive defections from the army? You're not seeing them, are you?
History tells us that remember, the Syrian regime legitimacy is totally spent, right? Given that the legitimacy is withered away, as I said, it's only a matter of time. I mean, before they are swept away. True.
But history also shows you that if you have the levers of power in your hands, like the army and the security services, you're not going to lose.
I'll take you back to Nicaragua in the 1970s.
Well, let's stay with this region. Let's stay with this region.
But history tells us, remember, the Nicaraguan leader, I mean, he used force in 1975, he crushed the revolt, 4 years later he was swept away. The same thing we can expect in Syria. For now, the elite guard is staying with the regime, right? But we don't know where the stance of the army. Remember, the army in Syria is made up of conscripts.
Yeah, but our motion is resistance is futile, and the resistance seems to be killing a lot of people at the moment and keeping the status quo exactly where it is.
As sad as it is, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's naive of us to think that change will be easy, that change will not go, I mean, through tribulations and through hardship. But as I say, in the midterm, in the next few years, there will be change. And
wishful thinking on your part?
I mean, again, the empirical evidence demonstrates that it's not.
Ah, okay. Anwar Bukas, thank you very much indeed. Now let me ask Jane Kinnaman, please, to speak against the motion.
My colleague and I would like to make it very clear from the outset that we support people's rights. We do not support repression. But in addressing this motion, we think that we need to be realistic. Democracy for the Arab region is possible, and I believe it is desirable, but it is not inevitable, at least not in the foreseeable future. It would be wonderful if we could see united popular movements peacefully persuading rulers to say yes to reforms and to embark on real, meaningful democratic transitions. But what we're already seeing in most countries in the region is looking very different. There already is, and there will be, further intense resistance from governments who have many tools to draw on. Other groups too will be resistant to change, including members of ruling parties, business elites who are gaining from the status quo, sometimes foreign powers, and anyone who feels that they will be losers from democracy. In Egypt and Tunisia, a key factor was not only the unprecedented solidarity of the opposition, but also the solidarity between the army on the streets and the people on the streets. Rulers were not able in those situations to really go through with the use of brute force. But force can work. It's interesting that we see more Arab countries today recruiting for their security forces overseas. Brute force can be particularly effective if it's combined with divisions in society, ideological, tribal, ethnic, or religious. We are seeing those divisions being exploited, particularly in Syria, Libya, and in Bahrain. We saw this also in Iraq in 1991, where Saddam Hussein did manage to buy himself another 12 years in power. There will be a huge amount of propaganda and disinformation designed to exploit those decisions. But there is a difference between the short term and the long term. From a ruler's point of view, a few more years in power may seem worth it, but the national interest of these countries will be better served by allowing peaceful reform and trying to build a consensus behind it in society. Thank you.
Jane Kinnaman, thank you very much indeed. Isn't the biggest thing in the favour of these revolutions that the attitude of the West has changed, the attitude of the international community has changed? No longer will they support or turn a blind eye to dictatorships as they did with Mubarak, as they did with Ben Ali in Tunisia. It's not going to happen. And that's a big boost to the revolutionaries, isn't it?
I'm not sure we're suddenly seeing a new, consistent, pro-democracy policy emerging from the West.
But we're seeing things that have been said which haven't been said before. Obama message to Assad, be part of the change or get out of the way. You know, William Hague saying to Bahrain and other countries, deeply concerned by the unacceptable violence. Unacceptable violence. Governments must respond to legitimate aspirations of their people. We haven't seen that in a while from the West. Not in this region.
Statements are important, but in the case of Bahrain, it is really words rather than actions. Syria is rather different.
Okay, well, actually, they've cancelled some military contracts already with Bahrain.
True, but that's really UK legislation kicking in, that there are restrictions on arms exports. I think for the most part, that alliance remains very strong. Syria has always had a problematic relationship with the West.
Yeah, well, they were finessed in the past, but they're not going to be finessed now, are they? So this is a big thing for the revolutionaries, isn't it? If the attitude of the West has really changed, if it's been shown to change, this is what could swing it their way, isn't it?
I think it was important in Egypt. I'm not sure that policy towards the Gulf has changed very much.
Okay, Jen Kinnaman, thank you very much indeed. Now could I please ask Nadim Khouri to speak for the motion?
Sure. Look, no one likes to give up power on their own, and definitely not dictators in this region who have gotten used to sit at the throne for more than 30 or in some cases 40 years. They're not going to give in without a fight. That is a fact. But what is going on here? What are the forces behind the Arab Spring? First, the wall of fear is falling down in the region. The wall of fear that has kept people from challenging authority, that have kept people from questioning their dictators. We're seeing those cracks in countries like Syria, where a few months ago it would have been impossible and people in cafes in Damascus would whisper. Two, what we're seeing is a collective yearning from deep down for things like freedom, social justice, and a more representational form of government. And finally, what we're seeing, again, a very powerful force that my colleague talked about, is a coming of age of a younger generation, people like you in the audience, who represent a big demographic bulge in our societies and who got tired of being marginalized. Now, what do you have in front of that powerful mix? You have dictators who've been around for 30, 40 years. Yes, in some countries, they still have the loyalty of their troops. But that's it. They are in free fall. They have already lost legitimacy. You know, President Assad can no longer go shop in Paris. They have already lost a lot of their internal support. Their violent crackdown is destroying their economy, and soon they will find it hard to pay those salaries of those soldiers and security forces that they need to keep on their side. Frankly, they are relying on some countries in the region, like Saudi Arabia and others, who seem to be bankrolling the counter-revolution, but that's not going to help all countries the same way. The train has left the station. Of course, it's going to take time. Yes, we all got used to Twitter. We all got used to sort of instant change. But you can't change countries that have been in the icebox for 30, 40 years in a week, in 2 months, or in 3 months.
Could you come to a close?
Sure. And just because these uprisings are encountering some form of resistance that was expected, let's not minimize the dynamic nature of these movements, the courage of the protesters, and the wind behind their sail, because I am convinced that they will succeed.
Nadim Khouri, thank you very much indeed. You say that some of these governments that are pushing back and resisting still have the loyalty of their troops, but that's it. That's everything, isn't it? As far as staying in power is concerned?
No, because
they don't need the loyalty of their people because they were never elected anyway. They don't need the buy-in from the people, do they?
Yeah, but you cannot run an economy when you've got your soldiers in the streets of your cities. You cannot create jobs for that new demographic that you want to keep on your side if you don't get investment. And who's going to invest
isn't that
today?
the problem in Egypt? You know, they may have had their revolution, but what's changed? They're ruled by a military junta.
Yeah, well, not yet. I think let's wait to see the elections, and you know, we're seeing the international community.
But that's
speculation.
speculation. What they've
no,
got
look at what the G8 just promised last week. I mean, they are going to shower Egypt and Tunisia with money. This is the sort of carrot approach.
If it moves in the direction that they hope it will move.
Right.
There are big ifs attached here.
Of course,
there are price tags to all this aid, isn't there?
There has never been a change without risk. But frankly, you know, the opposite side tells you about realism. What has realism given this region? What has it given us? It's giving us 40 years of rotten politics, of rotten economies. We can't export anything. We're not exporting ideas. We're not exporting goods except petrol that we're running out of. We're not producing anything.
But you're saying that people are going to continue to come up and confront the army and the security services and get mown down. There's no shortage of people who are going to do that. Or comes a point when people say, okay, enough people have died, it's not going to happen.
Well, it's a battle of the wills. It's a battle of the wills, and I'll concede you that. But what I've seen so far is that the protesters have been more courageous, have been more patient than the actual armed forces. The Arab Spring does not mean unseating every single dictator, right? It's a menu of change. It can vary from, you know, the getting rid of a dictator. It may mean a regime, change from an existing regime. We're seeing that in Jordan. We're seeing that in Morocco. And we may see an effort by some of the countries to buy off the loyalty of their citizens.
Okay, but we haven't seen anything yet that can't be rolled back, can we?
Well, of course, we've seen a lot that can be rolled back. I mean, let's not minimize that today Mubarak is in jail. okay? The Pharaoh of Egypt is in jail.
And his army is still in power. We have to move on. Nadim Khouri,
No,
thank you. Could I please ask Ahmed Ali Moukheni to speak against the motion, please?
Thank you, Tim. And ladies and gentlemen, I thank the honourable gentleman on the other side of the House for paving the way for our arguments. We, my colleague and I, do believe that this is not a call for repression, it's a call for realistic reading on the grounds. And we should not lump all the Arab countries together. Each country has to be treated differently. But we do believe that government resistance to the Arab Spring is not futile. It will bear fruit because of 4 reasons. Socially, we do not have social structures that will absorb and build up the momentum in order to achieve the critical mass to effect change. And all the demands have been portrayed either as the demands of the ungrateful or foreign collaborators. And both of them have driven people away and discouraged the wagon to be actually joined. Economically, my colleague talked about economics. Economically, the GCC countries will fund all the resistance in the Arab world. They will not allow role models to exist. And they will be able to give more handouts and offer more jobs. Thirdly, they can make everything lawful. They can make laws, they can amend laws, they can actually manipulate the judiciary, and will make everything lawful. So they have the tools, and they will know how to play with it. And finally, politically, we are dealing with animals that are very much endangered, and they would use their survival instinct. They will be merciless, they will devour everything in front of them. There will be no time for values. And if you want to see more bloodshed, then that's what you're going to see. And if I may end my introduction here, let's not rely on EU and the European Union or the States or any external forces. They are manipulated, they have been, they will be. Thank you.
Ahmed Ali Al-Moukheni, thank you very much indeed. If they're in such a delicate, parlous state, as you say, they may well fall apart internally. This is the land of coups and unhappy families, isn't it? This is the region for it.
Well, I don't think they will fall apart because they made sure that they have this nervous system going around.
They've fallen apart in the past.
No, they haven't.
In the past. They don't have normal transitions of power.
They have been very resilient.
Coups.
They have been resilient. Whatever coup they've had.
They have fights, they have feuds, they have internal disagreements. Left, right, and
money
center.
speaks, Tim, money speaks. They can buy everybody. They will buy everybody. And all the misery you see will be bought out in time.
They're not buying the people who keep coming onto the streets time and time again. As
one of
those on this side has said,
the
thing that's changed is fear. And when there is no longer any fear among people, what levers do the dictators have? What levers do they have?
We have several examples.
When people don't want their money and they're not afraid of them, what levers do they have?
People will be defied, people will be kept, in their homes, they will be arrested, they will be prosecuted.
But they did that in Egypt and they did it in Tunisia.
Egypt is a different case.
They did it in Egypt and Tunisia.
Different case. But you see, Egypt...
But do you think the people in the Gulf are going to accept what the people in Egypt and Tunisia have overthrown?
You have to remember one thing, Tim. Egypt and Tunisia were taken by surprise. These people in the Gulf here, they have done their homework, and they are going to make sure that none of the other countries would fall to allow for their failure.
It's a last-ditch move. It's a desperate move.
It is, but they will make it.
And that won't last very long. If they know the game's up,
we know it is for the time being. The argument is for the time being, and for the time being,
but they know
will
that
succeed.
The game is up already, don't they?
Well, they know the rules.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be so nervous.
They are changing the rules.
So insecure.
They can change the rule of the game. They can do all of things.
And you think the people will accept?
They do not. The people, you can actually mobilize them. But if you do not have structures to really amass that mobilization, you will not bear fruit. It will be just, riffraffs, waving flags in front of the government. That's it.
Ahmed Ali Al-Moukheni, thank you very much indeed. All right, we're going to take your questions now on the motion. This House believes resistance to the Arab Spring is futile. Gentleman in the second row there in the red.
My name is Abad Diab and I'm Syrian. People are now protesting because truth is now unveiled. No one can stop them because now governments will think twice before they act anything, because whatever they will do, it will be shown.
Okay, Jane Kinnaman, do you want to react to that?
I agree it's very important. It's very hard now for governments to cover up crimes, but there is a huge battle of information, of propaganda in the traditional and in the social media. There are pro-regime Syrians going around the world telling people that everything you see has been faked by activists or is a conspiracy by foreign satellite channels that we could name. So it's not clear yet who is winning that battle for ideas. And I think, again, in that space, there's going to be very, very fierce resistance.
Let's be honest here. Who is believing Syrian state TV? I dare anyone in this room to watch Syrian state TV for 1 hour without cringing. No one is. You know, when
why
they
don't
actually,
why don't we ask them? Why don't we ask them? You've posed the question. Does anybody here believe Syrian state TV?
Well, first of all, who would actually watch Syrian state TV?
No one.
That might be a better
Well,
question.
thank you very much. They've just made my point.
Okay,
for
let me go back to the questioner here, because your claim is that whoever controls the social media is going to control power in the end.
Yes. What I'm saying is that if you have a mobile phone, and you can press a button that would send it to another country which show the truth, this is a deafening tool to the regime, because you're showing.
So in the end, the regimes, you're saying, can't resist this.
Yes.
But you see, you can mobilize people, but if these people do not fall into organized movement, you know, it's just a futile exercise. I mean, they will come, they pour emotions, you know, they will feel happy about what they've done, but then eventually, that's it.
Tahrir Square wasn't a futile exercise, was it?
What, sorry?
Tahrir Square in Cairo was not a futile exercise, was it?
Do you know how many times they actually mobilized people? In that month alone, there were 2,000 attempts. 2,000 attempts in Egypt alone that month to actually have a revolution. And they were crushed over and over again until they managed to.
And they keep coming back. And they keep coming back everywhere.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is no denial that an Arab public sphere has emerged that is based on this blend of, you know, internet and at the same time also print technologies, right? And that public sphere, within that public sphere, Arabs have discovered their political voice. So that's where the strength, I think, of these technologies, in addition to other elements, because this is not a Twitter.
It will take time, very long time. Well, people have suffered political starvation for 40 years, decades of political starvation. And you expect them.
Doesn't mean they haven't been thinking, does it?
That's a different story. People can think, they can dream.
They're doing more than that in Egypt and Tunisia and Syria
daydreaming
and
has
Yemen
been proven to
and
be the
Bahrain.
main
They're
cause
doing more
for,
than thinking.
you know, depression. Daydreaming is the main cause for depression.
Okay.
They are having depression.
Sorry, let me get
Just one more point, and then I'm going to move on, because there are lots of questions.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to clarify something. So what the other side would have you believe is because there are no existing structures, no well-established political parties, transitions cannot happen. Sure. Well, you know what that sounds like? Like the argument the regimes are painting. Well, there are no alternatives. It's only us. It's Mubarak or chaos. It's Assad or chaos. Well, that's not true. Who's to blame for not having a political party? No, who's to blame for not having a political party? If there was a structure, everyone would be in jail and there would have been no uprising. Yes, it is a challenge. No one is underestimating the difficulty of the transition. Okay, again, you are getting something out of the icebox, putting it in a microwave after 40 years.
We're talking about the time being.
Let him come back on this.
We're talking about the time being. The time being, any resistance will not be futile. It will succeed. If you talk about 10 years from now, perhaps. Different generation, different people, different interests.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Up there, lady at the back, yes.
The opposition has claimed repeatedly that they are pro-democracy, but isn't that what the Arab Spring is all about? The Arab Spring is a movement for democracy and for reform. So how is it futile? How is resistance to the Arab Spring futile? You said so yourself that yes, in the Egyptian case, there were several protests and they were crushed, but they succeeded in the end. So how is it futile exactly?
It's futile because of many reasons. I mean, the discussion we have had is that it is futile in the time being. You will not see immediate results. In Egypt, for example, it's been going on for years and years. On average, 300 to 500 protests or attempts to do a coup against the regime every month. And in that month when it happened, there were about 2,000 going on. So it will take time. It's a wishful thinking. We do not say it's not going to happen. It will happen. Do not believe that just by going to the street, you will make change. You need strategy. And if I may go back to the issue of Yemen and people deposing their leaders, To my surprise, most of these people were just, they were born on the moment. They did not have strategies. They do not have strategies. And they think if you have a strategy and you have people who are organized, you can be targeted and you can be eliminated. But they have to take that risk if they want to succeed.
We're not saying that the Arab Spring is futile. We're not saying that democracy movements are doomed to failure. What we're saying is that the forces of resistance are very strong. They are forces to be reckoned with. The struggle is going to be long and hard.
And you're betting on the forces of resistance winning out, at least in the short and medium term.
At least in the short term in some countries. I would distinguish between, for instance, Yemen, where I do think that Saleh's attempts to hold on to power are now futile. I think his days are numbered. And the situation in Bahrain, where unfortunately I think they are in a worse
days
position.
Are numbered?
No, this is what I'm saying. I think that Saleh's days are numbered. I think if you look at the situation in Bahrain, the democracy movement has been set back more than a decade by the recent events.
Well, it's very... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I mean, protests are going to follow different trajectories and in different places. I mean, in Libya and Yemen, I mean, it's fair to say that the regimes are done. In Syria, the outcome is going to depend, obviously, on endurance. I mean, how long can the protesters sustain it?
But answer Jane Kinnaman's point about Bahrain, will you?
But the same thing can be said about the regime. How long can the regime maintain, I mean, his security forces mobilized, I mean, in a war mode? For how long can you go? For how long can they sustain the cohesiveness of the regime? I'm sorry?
How long Egypt has been under emergency law? 35 years or something like that?
These are different, that's right, but these are different contexts. These are different contexts. People have seen what people power can accomplish. And the same thing is going to happen in Bahrain. I mean, you cannot continue repressing 70% of your population. So if you want to make a forecast of what's going to happen in the near term, it's either, very unfortunate, it's either there's going to be a resistance, right? When the street protests don't work, we move into different kinds of resistance.
Why can't you go on repressing 70% of your population? If you have the power in your hands, you can go on doing it indefinitely.
That's when the power of street protests is fundamentally changed into violent resistance.
You're not buying that, Jane Kinnaman.
So that's where we are going into Bahrain.
I also want to say, I mean, sorry, let me just...
Can we just get her to answer that and then come back on it?
I think you're right. I think having failed to be able to achieve things through the very weak parliament that hardly functions, I think that there are going to be more people turning to violent resistance in Bahrain, but ultimately they're not really armed. It's going to be an unpleasant thing, it's going to be an irritant, but I don't think that resort to violence is actually going to be successful there either.
Nadeem Khoury, you want to make a point?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the Bahrain model, which seems to be now the model of sort of the so-called resistance to the Arab Spring. First of all, the resolution it's futile. I mean, it takes time. The apartheid regime in South Africa, it took time to bring it down, but it was clear that history was blowing the other way. And it will be the same in Bahrain. You know, if Bahrain was so normal, if it managed to turn the corner, how come it still has to rely on GCC and Saudi troops to keep the peace? You know, we all saw those ads
South
of
Africa
Bahrain
was in a very
business friendly.
difficult position, wasn't it?
Well, and Bahrain will be the same.
It was on its own. Bahrain is apparently surrounded by friends.
Well, surrounded by friends with a lot of money, that's true. But you can't rule against 70% of your people today for very, very long. You know, little things will start. I mean, let's take the example. Bahrain spent millions and millions of dollars on a campaign called Bahrain Business Friendly. I'm sure you've all seen those ads. What has that gotten them today? Their reputation is in tatters. No one would go invest there. So yes, their wealthy friends are going to spend money, and maybe in Bahrain, because it's a small population with a lot of money, they're going to be able to buy some time, more than some other countries. But it is futile. Maybe in Bahrain they can buy 5 years or 10 years. In Syria, maybe they'll be able to buy 1 year. But that just means, you know, it might take a year. No, but I think it's very important because they're conceding, well, it's going to be hard in the short term. Of course it's going to be hard in the short term.
Then the whole argument is time. You know, you have been going on and on and on about time. We do not disagree on the time, but we are talking about now. Immediate and short term, mid-term, you know, these powers would curb the momentum. If you curb the momentum, you have curbed the Arab Spring.
I mean, if you think the transitions, I mean, towards democracy, I mean, are going to quickly materialize, you will be disappointed. I mean, you're talking here about, well, they might happen in 10 years. What if it did happen in 10 years? That's not too bad. I mean, look,
he's not going to be disappointed. He's arguing the other way.
No, that's fine. Well, that's exactly what he said. No, what he said is that, I mean, there might be a change in 10 years, and this is exactly what we're arguing. We're like, revolutions take time. What we are seeing is just the beginning of a long process. I mean, even in peaceful revolutions, like in Egypt and Tunisia, it's going to take at least half a decade.
Okay,
right?
Okay. I'm going to move on and take a question from the lady in the front row there.
Good evening. I've got a question for the motion for.
Where are you from, please?
Jazi from Qatar. For those against, first of all, don't you think it's too late to just, give up at this stage? Because, I mean, a generation who was able to create a protest of millions through a Facebook page will not allow such a thing to continue, especially after all those people that died already. We've all seen, for example, the army working hand in hand with the people in Egypt and other countries in this protest. I mean, yes, again, don't you think it's too late?
Absolutely, absolutely. We are not suggesting that people should give up in their struggle for democracy and rights. Rather, we are trying to outline the type of forces that will be trying to counter.
But she has a point that this is the first Facebook revolution. This is what's underlying her question.
Yeah, that's true. But then you see, Facebook is not sufficient to actually do things and happen in government. You have to realize, I mean, not you, I mean, everybody has to realize what happened in Egypt, people in the Gulf and other Arab countries have learned from. They have, as the protesters learn, governments also learn. And they know how to handle it. They actually diffuse and they preempt all their movement. We are not against people. We are not against people's rights. But we are saying you cannot dream. You have to be very practically oriented if you want to affect change.
I'd like to go back to the question and ask why you think the revolutions are unstoppable. You clearly do.
I think we cannot compare. I mean, Ms. Jane gave an example of Saddam Hussein being in power for 12 years without anyone doing anything about it. But it's not the same today. The technology, the youth, the new generation, the power that's mixing with all the countries, it's not going to work. I mean, we all know Gaddafi and all the other leaders are momentarily going to leave soon. It's impossible for them to stay for 12 years. And again, my question is, isn't it too late? I mean, it's too late now to just believe it's not going to work.
I don't think it's too late. I think governments, they would still continue working at it. They will still, as I said, they will curb the momentum. What do not want to happen? They do not want the momentum to build up to reach a critical mass to affect change. They know it's going to happen 20 years from now, but they want to buy time. They are curbing the momentum. They are cutting, and they are, because they have the money. And as I said, you cannot rely on the European Union or the US or the Western powers.
One moment you're saying they have their backs to the wall and they're like animals, then you're having them survive 20 years.
They can.
Which?
I think the Gulf countries can survive. And the Gulf countries would make sure that the other Arab countries whose interests are very much deep-rooted with them will continue. I mean, you have just seen that they are heavily investing in Egypt. The $40 billion promised by the G8, quarter of which will come from the Gulf countries.
And Wabakar, you want to come in?
You're absolutely right. I mean, for the resistance, as I said, it was expected. I mean, look, the Tunisian leader Ben Ali, I mean, he did not choose not to use force. It's his military, right, that did not obey the orders. Same thing in Egypt. It's not that Mubarak, I mean, did not order his military force to use force. It's his military forces that did not use force. So they're not, the GCC or others, they're not just inventing a new model. Look, two things. This wave protests are about two things. You're right. There are the riches, and then there is the political legitimacy. You can buy some time with what we call the rentier effect, by buying people off. But even in the GCC, there are troubles. I mean, Saudi Arabia cannot fund other countries, Morocco and elsewhere. It has its own problems. Unemployment in Saudi Arabia is 40%. The youth bonds.
Let me come back to the questioner here. I just want to come back to the question. Excuse me. I just want to come back to the questioner here and ask her how far you think that revolutions in this part of the world, in this region, in the Gulf region, can actually go.
if we talk about the Gulf not being happy with the dictatorship, for example, if one day you believe that people will protest in the Gulf against dictatorship, I don't see that happening because everyone in the Gulf is, or mostly, are happy. And if we're going to talk about...
happy with what? Dictatorship?
Happy with... No, it's not dictatorship. That's what I mean. I mean, if we say democracy, for me, it's a fancy title, really. We have here freedom of speech more than anyone else. And we have all our rights in terms of... I mean, as a Qatari, I can speak that we have more rights than we deserve. We don't pay for anything.
More rights than you deserve? I think some people might argue with you over that.
But if you look at the wider Gulf, if you look at the wider Gulf region, four out of the 6 GCC countries have seen protests this year.
I mean, the Arab Spring is not just about revolution. The Arab Spring is about a transition of the Arab peoples from being subjects to being citizens. Okay, and if we accept that premise, then you can have multiple models in the region coexisting. And it's great that you feel that you can go and ask for your governments. Your government never gives you more than you deserve. You deserve this and more, you know? And it's the same in Bahrain, you know? I mean, this is, I think, this is sort of what the heart of what's happening in the Arab Spring. No one is saying every country is going to go get rid of its dictator. I'm Lebanese. We'd actually have to get rid of 17 dictators in Lebanon, each community. You know, I mean, no, but what we are saying is what we are witnessing today is history shifting. And if we stay quiet for a second, we can hear it. I mean, look at us. We're all optimists. 6 months ago, probably all of us would have been pessimists. And just think of that. Think of that for a second. Deep down, you feel change is coming. And the other side, when I hear them, you know what I remember? I remember conversations I had in Egypt after Tunisia, because you are right, Tunisians showed us the way. And after Tunisia, Egyptians would say, but it's different here. We're geostrategic. We're too big a player, you know, too big to fail. And then Egypt fell. And then President Bashar al-Assad got in the Wall Street Journal and said, Syria is different because the people love me. And it's the same. I hear it the same. They will change. They will change.
Let him come back.
It is not that we are too good to fail. I'm not saying that the Gulf countries are perfect.
Too big to fail.
We are not too big to fail. We are not saying that. We just say, well, they have the tools. They have what it needs to make them succeed. They will succeed. They will make this Arab Spring futile.
Okay, what I want to do here is just take a little sample of opinion from some people in the audience. I just want a sentence from various people. If you'll put your hand up, we'll get a microphone to you to answer the question that our questioner here raised, which was basically saying, we've got enough rights here. Why protest? You know, we have all the freedoms that we need. And I want to know whether that view is echoed by other people in the audience. So just a sentence, really, just a brief view.
I think someone's rights are not necessarily the same as someone else's rights. You know, the rights of a Moroccan are not necessarily the same.
Where are you from?
I'm from Morocco, as it happens.
You don't feel you have enough rights, do you?
Well, I'm looking at things rather than materialistic. I'm more interested in having, you know, things such as freedom of expression, the freedom to choose, the freedom to decide my future.
That's what you'd like to have?
Absolutely.
Okay, is that view echoed by anybody else have a view? There's a gentleman there in the 4th row.
Hello, I'm from Qatar. I just want to say, why people look for countries above us? Why don't you look for countries below us? That's why she's right. We have rights more than our rights. Why don't we have look at countries below us?
You have all the rights that you want.
Yes.
And all the rights that you need. Anybody else?
Can I have an example of a country that's below us?
Below them.
Oh, yes. No, he said below us. Okay, below them.
I mean, like,
give me an example of a country that you think is below
like
Qatar, for example.
you have in Asia, in Africa, there are many countries below us. I mean, like, for example, in Qatar we have
below you in what way?
In what sense, yeah. I mean, like, in Qatar we have free education and free medical services. In the US, you know, there's like huge conflict between, the health insurance, and in Qatar we have it for free. So I think she's right. Why do we look for countries above us? Why don't we look at countries below us?
Okay, anybody else want to make a brief point about the subject that we're discussing? There's a hand up there.
Well, all of you here, we've just been talking about the problems in Egypt and in all of the other places in the world. And about Qatar specifically, you can see that everyone here has, like, students have education that is higher than most places in the GCC. We have a high economy. We have good medical care. Honestly, looking at every single other place in the GCC, can you say that Qatar doesn't really have the best kind of, like, life for the citizens here? We have all the freedom we can get. We have all the things. And if And if we don't, then why hasn't anyone already protested?
And you
Can we make a quick point here?
Yes, please. Yeah.
How many?
I'd like you to come in.
I agree, and I don't think it's a. You know, you're lucky that you're born in Qatar or that you're born in the GCC. You know, you're born with a big a virtual sum in the bank because your country is very rich in natural resources. But what is the percentage of people who work in Qatar, who work in Saudi, who work in the UAE, who are not born in these countries? And do they benefit from the free healthcare? Do they benefit from all these rights? Do they benefit?
Okay, I'm just going to take a comment from the original questioner on this issue. Can we get a microphone to you?
One very brief comment. I think we don't thank God we're Qatari because we have a big amount in the bank or because of the petrol. A lot of other countries do have a lot of money. It's how our leaders invest in us. That's what we're proud of. And that's why we won't protest. The education they provide us, I mean, Education City, Aspire, the medical care, these are things that are not because they have money. A lot of other countries have money. That's because they care about their people. They care about how we will turn out in the end. And that's my point.
Okay, we're going to move on and take some questions from elsewhere now. Gentleman there has a question.
I find it difficult to understand the
Where
argument.
are you from, please?
Oh, sorry, my name is Mahjoub Zweri from Qatar University. I find it difficult to understand the argument of the opposition of the motion because basically any debate, any discussion about Arab Spring should keep in mind that this is a process. It will take time, of course. And this time, obviously, people will not happen. I mean, this kind of change will not happen if people sit at home. Basically, they need to move. Yes. This movement will lead to people demonstrate. Yes. They may, you see clashes in the street, people they may kill. This is the nature of the revolution. So basically, you cannot say that, there is no hope for this, because basically,
they didn't say that.
Let me finish. Because basically, you are speaking about democratization or changing. ABC change is actually people demonstrating. People go outside, people express their ideas. So basically, in the nature of your discourse, there is a problem of
the time frame suggested here.
You cannot, a contradiction as well. You cannot speak about democratization without people demonstration and express their ideas.
Okay, Jane Kinnaman.
I think you're misunderstanding our argument. We are not saying that there is no hope for change or that setbacks mean that there will never be democracy. What we're saying is that the resistance forces do have a lot of tricks up their sleeves. They want to survive, they want to maintain power, and they will have some successes. Even if they're not victorious in the long run, there's a great quote from the economist, John Maynard Keynes, which is, in the long run, we are all dead. If I'm a dictator fighting for survival, 5 years is worth it
This
for me.
This happened in 1979. Iran, under the Shah, he resisted, yes. And at the end of the day, he left.
Yes.
So, of course, at the end of the day, people won the battle, and they established, regardless your opinion on the regime.
You had a
but
structure,
you need
they had funding.
You need to listen to the wording of the motion.
Nobody can hear.
The wording of the motion. The wording of the motion is not resistance is ultimately doomed in the long term. The wording of the motion is resistance is futile. And it's not entirely futile. Regimes are able to buy themselves time. That matters to them, and they will fight for it.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from the lady in the third row.
My name is Aisha. I'm from Libya. To a Libyan and to somebody who is seeing events unfold all over the region, I don't think that it makes any sense to say that the dictators can resist, because if there was an example of a hopeless situation,
isn't he? Gaddafi is resisting somewhat.
He's resisting, but I mean he's definitely losing power, and I mean I think that
How long do you give him?
How long do I give him? Well, I hope tonight, but I'm not sure.
Jane Kinnaman.
I agree with you. Every country is different, though. And I think in Yemen and maybe in Libya, it is a matter of a very short-term amount of time for these rulers, but that's not the case looking across the whole region.
I just want to say that, okay, it's not the case across all regions, but I wanted to point out that the situation in Libya was, I think, probably one of the most I mean, the oppression that was happening in the country for 42 years. So if the Libyan people can do it, and we are not a large nation, we are no more than 7 million people, and we are being met by violence up until today, you know, and they are doing it, and they are rising, so it is futile to, I think, resist that Arab Spring.
All right, we're going to vote on the motion in a moment, but before we do that, I want to just go round each of the panelists in a semicircle and ask them for a sentence to sum up their views before you do get to vote. So if I could start with you, Anwar Bukhas.
Sir,
very briefly, a sentence.
Sure, the thrust of today's wave of protests is less about economic grievances, is less about identity, but it's more about political legitimacy. That's what it's all about.
Nadim Khoury.
The wall of fear has been broken in the region, and a new generation, a younger generation, has made its arrival to the political scene. The genie is out of the bottle. It's not going to be an easy ride. Not all countries are going to follow the same path, but change has come, and whoever tries to resist that change is fooling themselves and preparing themselves to go to The Hague to be tried.
Okay. Ahmed Ali Mukeni.
For the time being, resistance to the Arab Spring is not futile. It will bear fruit because they have the authority, they have the money, they have the power, and they will make it happen. You will see lots of lives.
Jane Kinnaman.
I'll just remind you, this is not a vote on whether you support the Arab Spring. It's a vote on whether the resistance is futile or whether the resistance can be effective. I think the democracy activists have to believe that they'll win if they're ever going to be successful, but they also have to recognise how powerful the forces against them are in order to tackle them.
Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to vote now on the motion. This House believes resistance to the Arab Spring is futile. Would you just take your voting machines? Let me just explain to you how they work. If you want to vote for the motion, that is the side represented by those on my right, you're going to need to press button 1. If you want to vote against the motion, the side represented by those on my left, it's button 2. Whichever button you want to press, would you please press it now? You only have to press it once. Through the miracles of modern science, your vote will be transmitted to the computers, and we should have it for you in just over 20 seconds' time. All right, there we have it. 73% for the motion, 27% against. The motion has been resoundingly carried.
Congratulations.
Well done. You had a tough side. You had an easy task. You had a tough side.
All that remains for me to do is to thank our distinguished panelists. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you to you, the audience, for your questions. That's it from the Doha Debates team. Thanks very much for coming tonight. Thank you. Safe journey home. Good night. Good night.